Here are some more leaves. What are these leaves from? Vine maple. And you can see again that the vine maple also, all maples have opposite branching patterns where one branch comes out of the stem directly opposite another, in contrast to alternate branching. So when you see a tree especially that has opposite branching, the Acer genus maple should be one that comes to mind. This is kind of funny over here. If you look up, there's a tree that you might or might not recognize. I'm going to move over here. I'm holding some of the leaves in my left hand. This is a red oak. I'm not sure exactly what species of red oak it is. Where I'm from, we have northern red oak, which looks quite similar to this. So this is not a native species here, but I wanted to point it out. I believe that Gary oak is the only native oak in British Columbia, and that grows in the coastal Douglas forest Beck zone, which is a coastal zone, but it's quite dry because it's in the rain shadow of the Olympic Mountains and of the mountains on Vancouver Island. It's pretty sunny out, but it's getting a little bit later in the afternoon, and this camera, when it's real dark, has a slow shutter speed. It makes a motion blur, so in these areas it might be a little blurry to you while I'm walking, but I'll try to hold still periodically so you can see what I'm looking at. Okay, here's a plant with pinnately compound leaves, a lot of leaflets. The leaflets have some spines on them, and here's some of the fruit. This fruit doesn't seem like it quite ripened, or it's not ripe yet. When it's ripe, it's usually a pretty dark blue, and when it's a flower, it's a yellow flower. So do you know what this one is? This is dull Oregon grape, Mahonia nervosa. What's this shrub that I've got my left hand on? You should hopefully know that one by now. That's Salal, Gaultheria shallon. How about this, the foliage that I'm holding in my left hand? Western hemlock, Tsuga Heterophylla. Look in the direction I'm pointing. Here's a very good nurse stump. So it looks like it was I can't tell if that was a Douglas fir or cedar nurse stump. It's pretty decayed and I don't see bark. But look at that tree growing out of it. Can you tell what species of tree that is from the bark? I'll hold you a little bit closer. So the two that you might guess would be Western hemlock or Western red cedar, because those are the main trees that will grow in nurse logs or nurse stumps here. This is a Western hemlock. And you can see these big roots, almost looks like an octopus. They've grown down into the ground. So that's what has allowed this tree to grow quite big. That's a big tree growing out of there. It's probably 60 or 70 centimeters DBH. So that's a good sized tree. Eventually, I suspect it's going to become pretty unstable as soon as that stump decays. It decays too much more than that, but I think it's got a little while to go. Eventually, I suspect a strong wind will be what takes it down when it just isn't strong enough to support itself. So here's a hemlock that has kind of won that battle. So I'm just going to touch it for a second so you can see where I'm looking, and I'll back up. Do you see how buttressed those roots are? Usually a hemlock, you'll find it where you won't have those roots sticking out to the side like that. So this is clearly a hemlock that started growing on a nurse log, and that nurse log has now decayed and eroded away. But this the nurse log wasn't so high, and this hemlock was able to get pretty good root structure. So that's why those roots of that hemlock look like that. Likewise, I'm pointing to another one right here. You can see this is the log that it was in probably ran this direction here, because you can see those roots kind of going elevated, going along in that direction. Here's a nice vine maple enjoying the sunshine. I think they often put their foliage out in gaps where they get sunlight during a portion of the day. So for whatever reason, when you're walking around the forest and there's just these patches of sunlight coming through, the vine maple seems to often be in one of those patches, taking advantage of that light. I'm looking around to see if I see anything that we haven't talked about recently. Mostly seeing some of the same things. What's this plant here that I'm touching with my left hand? Salal. How about this fern here that I'm touching with my left hand? Sword fern. Yeah, what kind of cone is that I'm holding? That's a Sitka spruce cone. If I spot some other cones, I'll pick them up for contrast. Okay, I'm going to lower you down. Look down toward the ground. What are those ferns down there? Those are deer ferns. Oh, here we go. Here's one that we haven't seen yet. There's a couple of them in this wet depression here. I'm going to see if I can kind of creep down here. So look down at the ground. They get a lot bigger than this, but they get these big leaves. They're basal leaves, meaning their stems come out right from the ground. This is skunk cabbage, western skunk cabbage, or swamp lantern. So that's really a wetland species, so you'll see that growing in very wet areas. They just put this railing up, I think, to keep people's dogs out, but if you look in the direction that I'm pointing, well, you can see that this is a muddy, wet area, and if you look in the direction that I'm pointing, you'll see there's a few more skunk cabbages growing along there. I'm pointing to some more skunk cabbage here, growing out next to this log on the ground. Here's a nice snag. I'm pointing at this dead standing tree, and you can see a number of holes in it. So those have been pecked by birds trying to find the insects that are inhabiting that wood to eat them. Okay, this is pretty great. There's a fallen log here that I'm holding with my left hand, and it has a lot of debris in it and a bit of soil. So we're seeing plants that typically grow in dead wood, but also some that don't always. So first off, here's a fern. This is kind of funny. If you look at these leaflets, note that they kind of overlap. Do you see how this one overlaps with the midribs, from the midrib of that one to the midrib of that one? They kind of have this zigzag pattern. And this is a fern that typically grows as an epiphyte. This is Licorice Fern. And I think it's Polypodium glycyrrhiza. I have to double check on that one though. All right. What's this? That's red huckleberry. Here's some more licorice ferns. I think these licorice ferns were growing on this mossy mat of this tree before the tree fell down, probably. Or maybe they picked up afterward, but certainly could have been beforehand. Here we go. Here's an interesting one. This is one you do not often see growing in a log. So take a look at this. Here, it's got a little bit of sunlight on it. Maybe you can see it a little bit better. The needles are pretty regular in length and are more or less sticking out from all sides of the twigs. And I'm seeing, it might be hard for you to see, but I'm seeing a few pointy buds on there. This is a Douglas fir, Pseudotsuga menziesii. That might have thrown you because Douglas fir generally does not grow in dead wood, but I think that this one probably isn't going to make it. Here, let's see, I think I saw one. Oh good, this one's in the sun too. Here's one that is more characteristic, and this is kind of cool. You can see when it first starts growing, the foliage that it puts out are just these straight needles, but then once it's grown a little bit bigger, it starts putting out this foliage. So that should tell you what this is. This is a western red cedar seedling. And let me see if I can find another one that's in the sun. The sunlight is kind of nice, hopefully a little bit better for you. Just out of the sun is this one right here that I'm holding. So irregular length needles, mostly coming out from the sides, not quite as round as the Douglas fir. That's a western hemlock seedling. Oh, and this is a good one that we haven't seen yet. So look at these leaves. Palmately veined, kind of palmately lobed leaves. But look at those thorns, and they might be spines, I can never remember botanically, so don't quote me on that. So look at all of those thorns, or I think they are spines in this one, and note that they're longer at the leaf nodes where the leaves join the stem. The spines are much longer there, or the thorns are much longer there. So this is black gooseberry, or Ribes lacustra. Ribes is a pretty big genus. There's lots of Ribes species in North America and Europe. There might even be some in China, I'm not sure. And in English, we generally call them either gooseberries or currants. And the difference is that the species that we call gooseberry are species that have thorns, and the species that we call currant are species that do not have thorns. So this is a pretty big genus, Ribes. Here's another really nice western red cedar seedling growing out of this downed tree.